What happens when a wealthy black CEO sits in business class and a flight attendant assumes he doesn't belong there? This happened on Flight 217 in just 6 minutes. A man who was wrongly challenged, removed from his seat, and humiliated quietly turned the entire situation upside down. Who was he? Why didn't he argue? And why did the entire airport suddenly fall silent when he stood up? This isn't a story about a man yelling his rights. This is a story about a man who owns the rules they'd tried to use against him. Stay with me, because by the end of this story, you'll realize sometimes justice doesn't knock. It sits quietly and waits for them to notice who's in the room. Where are you listening from today? Drop your city below. Don't forget to subscribe for more powerful true stories like this. Now, let me tell you what happened on Flight 217. Sir, this seat isn't for you. Business class passengers are boarding now. Her voice wasn't loud, but it was loud enough for half the cabin to hear. Mr. Langston D. Price looked up from the worn leather notebook on his lap. He was halfway through a sentence. He didn't blink, didn't flinch. He simply placed the Mont Blanc pen into the crease of the page. "I believe it is," he said quietly. The flight attendant, blonde, mid-30s, ES badge, read J. Carlisle, smiled in that practiced way, not warmth, not kindness, just a smile made of muscle memory and assumptions. She glanced around and leaned in slightly. "I don't want to make this uncomfortable, sir, but this is row 2? Business class section? Coach is boarding from the rear jet bridge?" Mr. Langston's voice didn't rise. "I boarded with Group 1. My seat is 2A. Her eyebrows flicked upward, just a breath. "We've had people sit in the wrong section before," she said. "These tickets can be confusing sometimes. If I could just see your boarding pass." He reached into the inside pocket of his wool coat, burgundy, soft but understated, and handed her the ticket. She scanned it, hesitated. Her smile didn't break, but something in her eyes shifted. He watched her read it twice. She pressed her comm device. "Gate team, this is Flight 217. Possible miscode on seating. I've got a gentleman in 2A claiming business class, but manifest's not syncing." Mr. Langston didn't interrupt. He didn't sigh. He just sat, his notebook now closed, resting on the tray. "Sir, do you have a frequent flyer card by any chance?" she asked, still holding his boarding pass like it might vanish. He reached into his wallet, pulled out a card, platinum, with a stylized L logo, not the airlines. She squinted. "This isn't from Ameriskies." "It's not," he replied. Her fingers twitched. She looked past him to seat 2B, still empty. Then down the aisle, where other passengers were trickling in. A man in a navy suit paused to watch. "Sir," she said again, this time dropping the fake smile, "I'm going to have to ask you to step aside until we clarify your seating assignment." Someone 2 rows behind coughed. A woman whispered to her husband, "Is he even allowed up here?" The man in the navy suit leaned toward the aisle, trying to hear. Mr. Langston slowly stood, not rushed, not embarrassed. He moved like someone who had done this many times before, but the tray rattled as he closed it. "May I have my boarding pass back?" he asked. The attendant hesitated, then handed it over, avoiding eye contact. He took his notebook and pen, lifted his bag from beneath the seat, worn leather, monogrammed with small initials, LDP, and stepped into the aisle. A woman from row 3 lifted her phone discreetly, camera already recording. Another passenger tapped her friend. "Watch this, something's going on." Mr. Langston glanced toward the front of the plane, then toward the jet bridge. A moment's pause. He did not protest, did not raise his voice. He simply stepped back into the galley. Carlisle tapped on her device again. "Yeah, I'll need an escort to verify. Passengers claiming 2A but doesn't match system read." Her colleague, a young Latino flight attendant, glanced at Mr. Langston. His expression said everything. He knew. "Do you have any ID, sir?" Carlyle asked. Langston offered it, driver's license neatly tucked behind the platinum card. She examined it longer than necessary, handed it back. Another passenger entered the plane, paused behind them, confused about where to step. The Latino attendant gestured him around. Carlyle looked at Langston. "We just need to confirm with ground staff." "Could you wait over there, sir?" She motioned toward the jet bridge wall where unassigned passengers usually linger. Langston didn't move immediately. He stood in silence for 3 seconds longer than was comfortable. Then he stepped aside. The woman from row 3 whispered into her phone, "Okay, this is insane. They just pulled an older black man out of business because what, he looks too regular?" The man in the navy suit finally sat down, but his brow was furrowed. On the other side of the jet bridge window, a gate agent appeared, her heels clicking sharply. Mr. Langston glanced at his watch. Simple, gold, but unmistakably handcrafted. And at the gate agent approaching, Carlyle began explaining. "Passenger claims 2A boarding pass, checks out visually, but system's not registering him as cleared." The gate agent didn't address Langston. She looked at Carlyle. "Let me scan again," she said, holding out a device. Langston handed her the pass without a word. "Beep." A pause. "Beep again." She frowned. "Huh? It shows full clearance." Carlyle stiffened. "Then why wasn't he flagged as boarded?" The gate agent shrugged. "Could be a sync delay. He's clear. Business class, 2A. Langston reached for his boarding pass. Carlyle didn't meet his eyes. The woman from row 3 called out quietly, "Y'all still want to double-check his DNA too?" Carlyle turned red. "Ma'am, please remain seated." Mr. Langston stepped forward. He didn't walk back to his seat, not yet. Instead, he pulled out his phone, dialed a number, held it to his ear for just 6 seconds. "I need the Langston line engaged. Flight 217 Ameriskies, cabin 2A. Confirmed timestamp." Then he ended the call. No anger, no threats, just procedure. Carlyle watched him, puzzled. "What was that?" Langston looked at her, and for the first time his voice held something different. Finality. "I believe you'll find out in about 6 minutes." He turned, walked slowly back down the aisle, sat in 2A, notebook open once more. The cabin was quiet now, but not peaceful. Not anymore. The seat creaked gently as Mr. Langston sat back down. He opened his notebook again, adjusted his pen between 2 fingers and resumed his writing, as if nothing had happened, as if being removed and reinstated to his rightful seat was no more inconvenient than turbulence. But the cabin had changed. The silence wasn't natural anymore. It was heavy, uncomfortable. A woman across the aisle, 3C, adjusted her scarf 3 times in 30 seconds. Her husband stared fixedly at his phone, not scrolling, not blinking. The man in 2B, who had taken his seat during the confusion, was now half-turned, away from Langston, pretending to read the safety card. The plane hadn't moved, still parked at gate B22. Passengers were still boarding, but it felt like something else had already taken off. 3 rows behind, a teenage girl whispered to her mother, "Why'd they make him get up if he had the right seat?" Her mother hushed her quickly, glancing forward. "Shh, not our business." The girl didn't agree. She pulled out her phone and opened the camera. No flashy angles, no commentary. Just a slow pan toward the man in 2A, the one writing in that little notebook, like he wasn't sitting in a pressure cooker. A TikTok title appeared above the frame. "When Grandpa sits in biz class and they try to move him." 2 seats down, a businessman in his 40S typed rapidly on a laptop, but every few seconds he glanced toward Langston. Not obviously, not directly, but the way you look at someone and know there's more than meets the eye. Langston wrote another line, paused, reached into the side of his bag, pulled out a second object, a pair of thin glasses. Not reading glasses. Smart glasses, designer. The businessman frowned. Not many 70-year-olds carried those. Back at the front of the plane, the young Latino flight attendant leaned into Carlyle's ear. "Did you see that card?" "What card?" she muttered, still rattled. The one he gave you, that silver one. It had a private crest. I think it was from a holding company. Probably some corporate loyalty gimmick. Yeah? Then why did he say Langston Line? That's not a loyalty number. That's a command phrase. Carlyle stiffened, looked back at 2A. Langston didn't look threatening, didn't look corporate, certainly didn't look like someone who belonged to a command line. But he wasn't scared, and that more than anything was suspicious. Outside the aircraft, the jet bridge was closing. Final boarding call. On TikTok, the video of Langston being escorted was already gaining views. One comment read, "Nah, this ain't right. He too calm." Another, "Watch it. He's about to own that whole airline." Back inside the cabin, Langston checked his watch again. 3 minutes had passed since his call. He adjusted the sleeves of his coat. From his angle, he could see the faint reflection of the flight crew in the galley's polished metal wall. Carlyle was pacing slightly. She kept tapping her comms device, but no one answered. Langston closed his notebook, slipped it into the leather bag beside him. Then he reached into the inner lining of the bag, where a phone rested inside a hard case. The moment he touched it, a small green light blinked twice. No one else noticed, but 3C caught something. She turned toward her husband and whispered, "Why do I feel like we're watching the first 5 minutes of a courtroom movie?" He didn't reply. Langston leaned back, folded his hands in his lap. He didn't smile, he didn't scowl, he waited. It was the kind of stillness that didn't ask for permission, it expected attention. The kind of stillness that belonged to a judge, a founder, or a man who'd built something no one could take from him. Another woman in 5A opened Twitter, searched for business class black man just for fun. The top post was a video clip from the teenager behind her, Langston, standing at the front of the plane, calm, boarding pass in hand, then walking off quietly. The caption read, "When they see color before credentials." She frowned, refreshed the page. Already 800 likes, 72 retweets, comments piling in. She glanced at the man in 2A again, then turned off her phone. From the cockpit, the co-pilot stepped out briefly. Carlyle turned toward him. "Do we have any update from ops? I think the manifest still isn't..." But he raised a hand. His headset was live. He was listening. "Repeat that," he said, frowning, then paused, looked at Carlyle. "Operations says they've been contacted by Langston Command. Direct advisory, level red. Langston, what?" "Yeah." I asked them the same. They told me to wait for priority override instructions. Carlyle looked at 2A again. This time, her hand trembled. Langston didn't move. He hadn't spoken in 10 minutes, but somehow the entire front half of the plane was now centered around him. And for the first time, people weren't whispering because he didn't belong. They were whispering because maybe, just maybe, everyone else didn't. Precisely 6 minutes and 18 seconds after the boarding gate closed, the call reached the Central Operations Room at DFW Terminal 3, Line 12, Priority Red. That line didn't ring often. A young agent named Tyler picked it up, expecting a misdial or, at most, a VIP traveler running late. Instead, he heard one name. Langston Line, Flight 217, Cabin 2A. "Confirm compliance chain." Tyler's hand jerked. "Sir, can I ask who's calling?" But the voice was already gone. The line went dead. He stared at the blinking record on screen. Langston Line? What was that? Meanwhile, back in the galley of Flight 217, the tablet in flight lead Carlyle's hand vibrated sharply. Priority Ops Advisory. Flight 217, immediate hold. Do not depart. Await revised crew protocol confirmation. Contact ground supervisor. Code GRE31. Carlyle blinked. This has to be a mistake. The Latino flight attendant leaned over. That's not a mistake. That's override language. What the hell is GR31? He opened the manual app on his own tablet, typed, scrolled, froze. You're not going to believe this. Try me. GR31 means direct involvement from equity governance. Someone with board-level control. Carlyle's face drained of color. You're saying that man in 2A might own part of the airline? Inside the terminal, Gate B22 had gone still. Supervisor Natalie Jones was on her way back to her desk when her comm buzzed. Natalie, Ops just pushed through a governance alert for your gate. GR31, something about a Langston line? She paused mid-step. Her mind flipped through vague memories from a training years ago. Langston? Wait, isn't that one of the holding firms in our ownership structure? No idea. But this came from Amerisky's HQ directly. They're asking if someone named Langston Price is on board. Natalie nearly dropped her tablet. She looked toward the plane. 2A, quiet, composed, writing again. Back in the cockpit, the co-pilot was now staring at the same advisory as Carlyle. Captain, we've got a full stop. Governance level hold. The captain frowned. What for? They think someone important is on board. Equity level important. What's the name? Langston. Langston D. Price. The captain turned slowly in his chair. He knew that name. Everyone in corporate leadership did. Langston Price was the founder of Langston Group, one of the quiet mega holdings in the country. Real estate, banking, logistics, and now apparently aviation. They were private, but powerful. And if Mr. Price was really on board Flight 2017 in business class seat 2A and had just been forcibly removed from his seat earlier, that was a crisis. Not a customer service issue, a crisis. At that moment, Carlyle's comm vibrated again. URG, all crew, hold position, executive. Present, confirmed. Do not engage. Passenger 2A. She reread the message, then read it again. Her hand shook as she set the tablet down. The Latino attendant stepped beside her. So, what do we do? We don't do anything, she said, voice dry. We wait. Meanwhile, Mr. Langston Price sat quietly in 2A. He'd made no calls since the first one. Hadn't even checked his phone. But he knew the moment was coming. Across the aisle, the woman in 3C was now openly watching him. Not recording, just watching. She wasn't sure what she was looking for. Maybe he'd explode. Maybe he'd stand up and make a speech. But he didn't. He just sat, like someone who'd already made the system move without needing to raise his voice. Inside the Amerisky's corporate command center in Atlanta, a middle-aged man in a Navy vest leaned over to a colleague. Pull up our board structure. Langston Group. The chart appeared on screen. He traced the lines with a trembling finger. There. 31% ownership stake. Voting control clause active since 2022. His voice dropped. God help us. He's not a passenger. He's the chairman. The engines hadn't started. The cabin lights stayed dim. And somewhere inside the cockpit, someone had said the words, "Executive presence confirmed." That phrase didn't exist in any public flight manual. But now, every member of the crew moved like they were being watched. And they were. Mr. Langston D. Price hadn't moved in 18 minutes. But somehow, he had managed to rearrange the atmosphere around him. In the galley, Carlyle stared blankly at her tablet. The screen now showed a flashing advisory banner. Langston Line Protocol, Stage 1 initiated. Await further instruction. Refrain from passenger engagement. Below that was a list of instructions. Flight cannot depart until compliance review is complete. All crew movements monitored. Defer all external inquiries to HQ response team. She whispered to herself, this is insane. The younger attendant, Mateo, leaned closer. Did you Google him yet? She shook her head. He showed her the screen on his phone. Langston D. Price, chairman, the Langston Group, 31% controlling interest in Amerisky's holdings. She swallowed. That's him? Mateo nodded slowly. Up in the cockpit, the co-pilot was on a silent channel. Command center confirms hold directive. CEO level engagement. No estimated release time. The captain didn't speak for a long moment. Then he exhaled through his nose, folded his arms, and muttered, "This ain't a flight delay, this is a compliance audit." Mid-air. Back in row 2, Langston flipped one page in his notebook. That was it. But Carlisle saw it from the galley and jumped. She turned to Matteo. He just wrote something down. Matteo frowned. Okay, what if he's documenting, recording every move? Matteo nodded slowly. Then we better move carefully. A few rows behind, the teenage girl had started live streaming on TikTok. No talking, just a silent scan across the cabin. Text on screen. Flight 217, still grounded. They won't move. That man in 2A hasn't even spoken. Crew got quiet real fast. Something's off. Y'all, this about to be a movie? In the operations room, Tyler, the young agent who'd answered the Langston line, was now surrounded by 3 supervisors and 2 legal reps. Do we have internal footage from that aircraft? Yes. Partial feed. Jet bridge cam shows interaction at seat 2A. Initial confrontation time-stamped at 7:42 IMEM. And what happened at 7:48? Tyler tapped the playback. The man, Langston, speaking briefly on his phone. Just 6 words. I need the Langston line engaged. Then, silence. Back on the plane, Carlisle adjusted her blazer. She had made the mistake of checking Twitter. Langston was right, was trending, so was Flight 217. People were guessing now. Theories were flying. He's probably a government official. Nah, that's private sector power, quiet billionaire vibes. He didn't threaten anyone, just called someone. That's when you know. Langston closed his notebook, folded it carefully, set it down. Then he stood, just stood. The act sent a ripple through the cabin. Carlisle stiffened. Matteo took a half step back. Langston adjusted his cuffs, looked toward the galley. Carlisle opened her mouth, but the tablet in her hand blinked before she could speak. Do not engage passenger 2A until contacted by lit Keem. She froze. Matteo leaned in. What does it say? She didn't answer, just stepped backward. Langston, expression unchanged, walked down the aisle. He wasn't in a hurry. He wasn't angry, but the walk alone, silent, deliberate, was louder than shouting. He reached the curtain, pulled it aside, stepped into the jet bridge. No one stopped him. The carpet of the jet bridge muffled his footsteps. Mr. Langston Price didn't hurry. He didn't scan the area like someone searching for help. He knew exactly where he was. At the gate, Natalie Jones, ground supervisor Terminal B, was reviewing boarding documentation when she saw him approach. She glanced up. Older gentleman, elegant but not flashy, deep burgundy coat, leather bag, calm eyes. She didn't recognize him, and that was her first mistake. Sir, are you stepping off Flight 217? She asked. Langston nodded once. Momentarily, she glanced at the tablet in her hand, half distracted. We're currently under delay. I'm trying to confirm with HQ. There seems to be a manifest issue. You'll receive a message shortly, Langston said. She looked up. I'm sorry? From your chain of command, he added, tone even, about the passenger in seat 2A. She opened her mouth to respond. Then her phone buzzed. Not the usual ping, a 3-tone chime she'd only heard once before during a board-level facility audit. She unlocked it quickly. Urgent. Governance. Alert. Amerisky's internal advisory code. LHG Alpha. Subject. Flight 2017. Executive Oversight Protocol activated. Involved party Mr. Langston D. Price, LHG. Status, active board member. Langston Holdings Group. Instruction, defer all operations, do not challenge or delay. Natalie froze. Her fingers loosened around the tablet. Her gaze slowly returned to the man before her. He was watching her, not with smugness, not with anger, just stillness. Like a teacher waiting for a student to finish reading the last line. She swallowed. "Mr. Price," she said, voice barely audible. "I wasn't informed you'd be traveling today." "You weren't meant to be," Langston replied. "Today isn't for formalities. It's for observation." Behind her, two gate agents noticed her expression shift. They exchanged glances. One opened the team chat group. A new notification was already pinned. "All staff, do not delay or engage Mr. Price without instruction. Level 1 compliance hold in place." Inside the aircraft, Carlisle's tablet buzzed again. Another advisory, this time with attachments. She opened the file. Read the first line, then sat down in the jump seat, legs suddenly weak. The document was an audit form, issued by Langston Holdings, subject, Field Integrity Assessment, Cabin Crew, Flight 217, Evaluator, LD Price, Governance Board. Her breath caught. He wasn't just a board member, he was auditing them. Live. Matteo stepped beside her. "What's wrong?" She turned the screen toward him. His jaw dropped. "Oh my God." Down at the end of the jet bridge, a young employee named Josh was returning from a coffee run when he saw Langston and Natalie standing in silence. He didn't know who Langston was, but he did see Natalie, normally firm, fast-talking, just listening. Josh passed them quietly. As he did, Langston turned slightly, nodded. Josh nodded back, instinctively polite, and kept walking. But something about the moment stuck with him. Not fear, not fame, just presence. In the Amerisky's internal group chat for cabin leads, messages were flying. "Is this the real Langston? Like the Langston Group? I'm shaking. I asked him to move seats earlier. He's on the compliance board. My friend in HQ says he personally signed the 2022 bias protocol. They're saying he's doing a surprise inspection, that this is bigger than a bad seating call." Back at gate B22, Natalie was on the phone with her direct regional. "Confirmed. He's here, in person." The voice on the other end sounded winded. "Get everyone aligned, no improvising. Whatever Mr. Price requests, you execute. Full authority. And the crew is under evaluation." Natalie turned her head slowly toward the plane. Inside 2A, Langston's seat sat empty, but somehow it felt fuller than ever. The absence was louder than presence. Passengers were whispering again. Some were checking Twitter. The young girl's live stream now had over 4,000 viewers. The caption had changed. He stepped off the plane. No yelling, no chaos. But everyone's acting like the boss just arrived. Carlisle finally stood. Hands shaking, she walked toward the front of the plane. He didn't speak to the passengers, didn't check rows. She stood near the curtain, heart pounding. For the first time in her 11-year career, she was afraid of silence. Because now she realized she hadn't just misjudged a passenger, she disrespected an owner, and she had no idea how deep that mistake would cut. In the operations office of Terminal B, the atmosphere had changed from busy to brittle. No one was walking fast anymore. They were walking carefully, like every step could trigger something. Natalie Jones stood by her desk, flanked by her assistant and 2 regional reps. All screens had been taken over by one alert: field integrity compromised, governance review pending. Her headset crackled. "Ops to gate B22. Confirm the location of Mr. Langston Price." She answered in a whisper. "He's requested the North Executive Lounge. I assigned a staffer to escort him." Did he say anything? Only this: let them catch up. There was silence on the other end. Then, understood. Inside the North Executive Lounge, the lighting was soft, gold tones. No announcements, no noise. Mr. Langston Price sat alone at the corner table. No coffee, no newspaper, just his briefcase. He opened it. Inside was a single folder, black, leather-bound, embossed with a silver emblem, LHG Oversight Division. He took out a document, set it on the table. Field Failure Report, Preliminary. Date, today subject Flight 2017, filed by L.D. Price, Chairman, LHG. Status, active review trigger. He slid it forward, toward no one, as if waiting for the room, for the system itself to read it. Back on the aircraft, passengers were still on board, still waiting, but no one was complaining anymore. Even the usual Type A travelers, the laptop warriors, the conference call moms, had stopped asking for updates. Instead, they were scrolling, watching, wondering. Carlyle stood in the galley, unmoving. Matteo finally said it. "What happens now?" She didn't answer. She couldn't. In the corporate HQ of Ameriskies, a conference room had just been locked. 6 directors, 1 legal advisor, and a CEO who looked like she hadn't blinked in 5 minutes. On the main screen was a paused image. Langston in seat 2A. Calm, not speaking, just existing. And next to that, a list of internal violations now under review. A quiet voice in the corner of the room said, "If he files it under malicious bias protocol, it activates Clause 7. Someone else exhaled. "Clause 7 triggers a real-time authority override." A third person spoke up, whispering, "He's going to fire someone today." In the North Lounge, Langston finally picked up his phone. No emotion, no hesitation. He made one call. "Yes," he said, "you may notify legal, and yes, begin protocol." Then he hung up, folded the report, closed his case. The gears were moving now, and no one could stop what was already in motion. At 9:07 a.m., Mr. Langston Price walked out of the North Executive Lounge, not escorted, not followed, just observed. All eyes turned as he passed through the terminal. Staff paused mid-tag. Security officers looked at each other but said nothing. A young man in Ameriskies uniform badge read, "Elijah," caught up to him breathlessly. "Sir, our Director of Airport Operations is waiting. Conference Room B." Langston gave one nod, then followed. Conference Room B wasn't meant for guests like him. Windowless, beige walls, metal chairs, but Langston didn't seem to mind. Inside, a woman in a dark blazer stood waiting, tablet in hand, her nameplate, K. Delaney, Director, Terminal Ops. "Mr. Price," she said, extending her hand. Langston shook it briefly. Her grip was firm, too firm, compensating. "Thank you for meeting with me," she began. "I believe there was a—" He opened his case, pulled out a black folder, set it on the table. "Before you speak," he said calmly, "you should review this." She frowned, flipped the cover, then stopped, stamped in red across the header, "Field's Violation Report, Flight 217, filed by L.D. Price, Classification, Class 1, Governance, Trigger." Delaney blinked. This wasn't a complaint. It wasn't even internal. This was official governance documentation. She swallowed. "Mr. Price, I wasn't aware this flight was under evaluation." "That's because it wasn't." He looked up. "Until I boarded." Outside the room, Elijah watched through the narrow window. He couldn't hear anything, but the air felt heavier. He wasn't the only one. 3 other staff members lingered nearby. One whispered, "Is that really him?" Another replied, "He's filing. He's not just mad, he's auditing us." Back inside, Delaney tried to regain control. "Sir, with all due respect, had we known of your identity, the crew would have been notified immediately. Protocols would have—" Langston raised a hand. "I'm not interested in what would have happened. I'm interested in what did happen." She froze. He continued. "A paying passenger seated in business class was removed without due cause. Provided documentation, still removed, still challenged." Delaney tried. "There was a manifest sync delay. It happens." "Your crew didn't mention a sync delay," Langston said evenly. They implied that a black man in a wool coat could not possibly belong in seat 2A. Delaney said nothing. He slid the next page forward. 2 witnesses recorded the incident. It's already online, public, growing. She took a sharp breath. Langston leaned back. I don't require an apology. I don't need a press release. He opened the final page. What she saw made her pale. Per Clause 7 of the Governance Charter, Langston recited, any staff engaged in conduct deemed to harm Amerisky's public trust or governance values may be subject to immediate disciplinary review. Delaney looked at him. You're invoking Clause 7? Langston nodded once. Effective now. A silence followed. Not the awkward kind. The permanent kind. The kind that meant, this is happening. Delaney reached for her comms. I'll begin HR processing. Langston shook his head. No, not process, not review. His voice didn't rise, but it cut sharper than any yell. Flight 217 is still grounded. The incident is live. Your brand is bleeding. He tapped the folder. I expect dismissal on record, immediate, with grounds cited under protocol. Delaney stared at him, then slowly stood. Understood. 9:26 a.m.A. A system-wide notice was issued to all Amerisky's terminals. Flight 217, AX Oversight, National. Immediate personnel suspension pending termination. Lead cabin attendant, J. Carlisle. Effective immediately by order of Board Oversight Chair L.D. Price. Under Clause 7, Bias and Passenger Dignity Protection. Inside the aircraft, Carlisle's tablet lit up. She read the line once, then again. Then her body sagged into the jump seat. Mateo turned toward her, confused. What is it? She didn't speak. Just showed him the screen. He stared at it, eyes widening. She had no idea, he whispered. By 10:15 a.m., a new message hit the inbox of every Amerisky's regional director. Subject, immediate directive. Executive instruction from L.D. Price, Governance Oversight. 2. All terminal ops plus HR divisions directive. Begin Phase 1 of Equity Standards Compliance. Cabin crew reassessment. All leads to undergo civil rights passenger training. Deadline, 30 calendar days. No exemptions. It wasn't a request, it was correction, and it was already live. Inside Conference Room B, K. Delaney had returned, flanked now by a senior DEI consultant from headquarters and a VP of flight operations, who looked as though he'd just sprinted from a panic room. Langston sat calmly across from them. The black folder now rested between them like a silent witness. The VP cleared his throat. Mr. Price, we've never had an oversight action of this nature go live mid-flight. Langston didn't flinch. Neither have your passengers, he said, but they've endured worse, quietly, repeatedly. The DEI consultant, a soft-spoken woman in her 50s, looked at him directly. What do you need from us, sir? Langston replied without pause. Nothing for me. He tapped the folder once. This isn't about me. It's about who's next. Meanwhile, on board Flight 217, a quiet announcement came over the intercom. This is your captain. Thank you for your continued patience. Due to an ongoing governance review, we are awaiting final departure clearance. No one groaned, no one sighed, because by now, every soul on board knew this wasn't a delay, it was a lesson. On TikTok, the live stream girl was now whispering, who just got someone fired, without raising his voice, without cussing, and now he's sitting in a meeting like he's the CEO. Y'all, what is this man's story? Comments poured in. He owns part of the airline. Like, owns. He's not punishing, he's cleaning house. That ain't just a black man in 2A, that's a system breaker. At headquarters, a new policy draft was now being reviewed. Title, Civil Rights Passenger Curriculum Cabin Staff. Mandatory magicals? Racial bias inferred by seating assumptions? Rightful Occupancy and De-Escalation Tactics. Langston had written every title himself. Because he didn't want apology tours, he wanted prevention protocols. Back at the terminal, Elijah, the young staffer, stood outside the conference room stunned. He turned to a colleague. "I've worked here 4 years," he said. "I've never seen anyone walk in, flip the script, and stay this calm doing it." His colleague nodded. "That's not anger," she said. "That's structure." Inside, the DEI consultant slid a new folder toward Langston. "We've compiled a list of all bias incidents logged in the past 12 months. Most never reached review." Langston looked down at the folder. Didn't open it. Just asked, "How many involved black women over 50? She blinked, then checked. 62%. Langston nodded slowly. "Start there." As the meeting ended, Langston stood. No closing remarks, no speeches, just, "Send me the first training video cut within 10 days. I want to see how your tone lands." And with that he turned, walked out. It was 11:04 a.m. when Langston Price returned to Gate B-22. No entourage, no media, just him, walking with the weight of silence and the kind of calm that made people stand straighter without knowing why. Inside Flight 2017, the crew stood frozen. Mateo adjusted his tie. The captain stood outside the cockpit door, hat in hand. Passengers watched as Langston stepped back into the aircraft. No music, no fanfare, just the soft click of leather shoes on carpet. In row 3C, an elderly black woman sat with a prayer bracelet wrapped gently around her palm. She had not filmed a single moment, had not commented, had not whispered. But now, as Langston passed, she reached out. Her fingers brushed his sleeve. He stopped, turned to her. She looked up into his eyes, full of history, full of knowledge. "You didn't have to come back, baby," she said softly. "You could have let this slide like all the others." Langston held her gaze, then answered, "That's exactly why I came back." He turned slowly, addressing the cabin. Not as a speech, but as a human moment. "I've been mistaken for the help more times than I can count," he began. "A porter, a driver, security detail, luggage man." A few passengers dropped their eyes. "I've also been the keynote speaker, the highest donor in the room, the author of the policy being quoted to me incorrectly." A quiet rustle moved through the cabin. "But I don't need anyone here to know my name." He paused. "I need you to know that the chair you sit in, if paid for, is yours. And the dignity that comes with it, that's not optional. That's not upgrade only. That's standard." He let that settle, then added more gently, "And if anyone tells you otherwise, you look them in the eye and say, 'The chair is not yours to deny.'" The plane was silent, not from shock, but from respect. Langston nodded once, then returned to his seat, 2A, sat, buckled in, and looked out the window like it was just any other flight. The captain stepped into the intercom, voice clear. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are now cleared for takeoff." On the live stream, the girl had tears in her eyes. She typed, "That's not just a passenger, that's a shift." Flight 227 touched down in New York just after 2 p.m. The landing was smooth, the applause light, that unspoken nod between passengers passed quietly. No announcement about the incident was made, no statement issued. Because dignity doesn't make noise, it makes room. At the gate, a small group of Amerisky's executives stood waiting. They wore tailored suits and tight smiles, holding clipboards and apology folders. Langston didn't pause. He didn't acknowledge the nods. He stepped off the plane with the same quiet presence he stepped on with. Measured, full, undiminished. Just behind him, a young black mother gathered her son's backpack from the overhead bin. The boy, maybe 11, looked out the window, then toward Langston's figure ahead. As they exited, he reached for his mother's hand. "Is that man famous?" he whispered. His mother smiled, then leaned down. "No, baby," she said. He's something better." They caught up to Langston near the gate. The boy looked up, shy but curious. Langston noticed. He crouched slightly, lowering himself to the boy's eye level, then said just one line. "Don't ever let the uniform fool you, son. Not theirs. Not yours." The boy nodded, small but serious. Langston smiled, then walked on. Outside the terminal, the sky was overcast. Wind tugged gently at his coat. A car was already waiting. The driver opened the door. Langston climbed in, didn't look back. That evening, across the internet, a single phrase began to trend. "The chair is not yours to deny." Screenshots, clips, articles, testimonies from black travelers, older women, invisible men. The story wasn't about revenge, it was about recognition. Inside a quiet brownstone in Harlem, Langston Price placed the black folder back into his filing shelf. He made no calls, gave no interviews, just poured a small glass of tea and sat by the window. Outside, kids played on the sidewalk. A neighbor called to another in the distance, and for the first time in a long time, Langston allowed himself a breath. Not as a chairman, not as a black man on alert, just as a person, upright, seen, in his seat. Thank you so much for listening all the way to the end. If this story stirred something in you, if you've ever been underestimated, ignored, or made to feel like you didn't belong, I hope this reminded you, your presence is not a mistake, and your dignity is not up for debate. Langston didn't yell, he didn't demand it, he reminded them who he was, without ever raising his voice. That's not just power, that's legacy. This story wasn't just about one seat. It was about every moment someone told us we couldn't sit somewhere, be somewhere, own something. If this resonated with you, please comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts, or if you've ever had a similar moment where you had to stand your ground or sit in your seat. Don't forget to like this video, share it with someone who needs it today, and subscribe for more stories that lift us up. Until next time, stay strong, stay seen, and stay seated in your chair.